7 ideas from sci-fi that became reality. Learn which technology would not exist if science fiction hadn't been around. Put Speechify to use and hear everything. Tomorrow, while bio can only speculate about what the future may contain, it appears that science fiction authors of yesteryear had a better idea. Digital innovations like cell phones, video calls, drones, and more may not exist if it weren't for the creativity of science fiction writers. Science fiction has been credited with inspiring several real-world innovations, including the credit card, antidepressant, and internet. Scientists at NASA credit several stories from the 50s and 60s with motivating them to join the space race. There are countless scenarios that have been explored in science fiction, from bleak futures to the exhilarating possibilities of technology, such as human cryopreservation. Both the Jetsons and Star Trek. Three-dimensional printers. The Jetsons was a popular 1960s cartoon series. In predicting 3D printing, the futuristic animation gave viewers a look into a utopian future. As a precursor to 3D food printing, the family's meals were prepared by a machine. In 1987, Star Trek fans were introduced to the Replicator, a device that could create food out of nothing in a matter of seconds. When 3D printing first appeared on TV, people were skeptical about its potential. 3D food printing is still in its infancy, but it has already allowed scientists to create complete and personalized meals. The mechanical and medicinal fields are just two of many where this technology is being refined. Exciting developments in 3D bioprinters could also have a profound impact on the lives of patients in need of organ transplants, either in addition to or as a replacement for cryopreservation methods. Cartoon characters from The Jetsons, gathering around the table before dinner. 1962, a William Hanna and Joseph Barbera production. The film 2001, A Space Odyssey. Future technologies depicted in Stanley Kubrick's 2001, A Space Odyssey eventually became widespread. In the 1968 film, the news was viewed by the spacecraft crew on tablets called newspads. Interestingly, the newspad would be introduced in an American courtroom more than 40 years later. In 2011, Apple accused Samsung of copying the look of the iPad with its Galaxy tablet. The lawyers for Samsung presented a still from Kubrick's film depicting the newspad as evidence that the iPad's interface had been conceived 40 years earlier. Samsung's argument was rejected, unfortunately. The guy in 2001, A Space Odyssey is reading the news on his iPad. The Empire Strikes Back, a Star Wars film. Artificial limbs. It's quite improbable that you'll ever have to combat your own father and risk losing a hand. Luke Skywalker ran into this problem, unfortunately. George Lucas, fortunately, envisioned a bionic hand for Mr. Skywalker that would perform identically to a natural hand. Since 1980, prosthetic limbs have advanced dramatically. In order to last longer and perform better, many prosthetics nowadays are created from futuristic materials. Bionic technology is being incorporated into some state-of-the-art prostheses in order to establish a neural link between the user and the device. Bionic limbs give their users the feeling of moving their own limbs because of the feelings they transmit to the brain. Those who are familiar with cryonics and life extension may also be familiar with the concept of cybernetic immortality. By removing a failing organ and replacing it with a permanent artificial one, a person's expected lifespan can be greatly increased. The next step beyond this is the possibility of mind uploading, in which a person's mind is effectively cloned and pasted onto sturdy machinery in order to live forever. What would you do if one day you discovered you were immortal? An artificially extended hand. Irvin Kershner's The Empire Strikes Back was released in 1980. The Time Machine, Part 2. Innovations in biometrics. Back to the Future 2 predicted numerous far-fetched things for 2015 in 1989, but none of them came true. Self-tying trains, flying cars and a clothing that dries itself are just a few examples. Some, like biometrics, did make it to completion, though. In the movie, Biff Tannen uses the cabbie's fingerprint as payment. These days, biometrics may be found practically everywhere. Touchscreen login on smartphones, facial recognition, and voice ID have all been useful in facilitating airport security, identifying criminals, and verifying citizens' identities, among other areas. Biometrics are helpful for the average person since they allow for secure logins to banking apps on mobile devices, access to medical records, and the ability to make small purchases. Physical identification verification, odor recognition, hand geometry, and DNA signature reading could all be possible in a future where humans have been reanimated from cryopreservation. Back to the Future 2, 1989, directed by Robert Zemeckis, has a man who pays for petrol with his fingerprint on a gadget installed in his car. Bluetooth headphones. The widespread use of wireless headphones is foretold in Ray Bradbury's 1953 novel Fahrenheit 451. Little seashells, the thimble radios tamped tight, and an electronic ocean of sound, of music and talk coming in on the shore of her unsleeping mind, the narrative posits. What's that you say? Apple's AirPods, sometimes referred to as the little seashells, had their debut that same year, 2016. Electronic heart defibrillator. Frankenstein, by Mary Shelley, is based on scientific inquiry and is often considered the first science fiction novel. The famous doctor who brought the dead back to life in the 1818 novella was Dr. Victor Frankenstein. The story was influenced, in part, by the work of Italian physician Luigi Galvani. Galvani was the first person to use electric shocks to cause muscle spasms in dead frogs. Many people thought Shelley's notion was fantastical, but in 1947, Dr. Claude Beck used a handmade defibrillator to save a patient's life by shocking the patient's heart. Years and hundreds of lives later, the defibrillator is still regarded a medical breakthrough of the highest order. Despite Shelley's graphic account of a defibrillator reviving the dead, the concept of resurrection is not as outlandish as she makes it sound. Jameson spacecraft satellite. Cryonics. There was a story called the Jameson satellite before there were movies like Sleepers and Passengers about cryonics. Neil R. Jones's story appeared in the best-selling science fiction journal Amazing Stories. It told the story of a heroic scientist named Professor Jameson who knows the end is near and requests that his nephew blast his body into the cold reaches of space. After being frozen for 40 million years, the professor is thawed out by cyborgs who then implant his brain in a robot body. Robert Ettinger, later known as the father of cryonics, first read this book in 1930, when he was just 12 years old. After that, he wrote the seminal work on cryonics, The Prospect of Immortality. Several cryonics organizations with hundreds of members and thousands of cryopreserved patients exist around the world, while society is still on its road to being revitalized by cyborgs like Professor Jameson. Furthermore, cryopreservation of humans is still the best option for a future where we live much longer than is achievable now. Conclusion. It's mind-boggling to think about how drastically technology has advanced over the millennia. Whether or not they were inspired by science fiction, groundbreaking discoveries long thought impossible had become commonplace. Who knows where the globe will be in the next century, given current tendencies? Cryopreservation techniques give us hope that we might survive to see it. Please like, comment, share and subscribe to my channel.